Hello, Third Stall friends. My name is Doug. This is a playlist about the resurrection of a 2010 Subaru Forester named Ruby and the dismantling of a parts car named Party. In the previous episodes, I think this will be episode 11, maybe 12. In the previous episodes, we dismantled the engine, took it out of the car, had the heads redone, put in new rings, honed the cylinders, and now I'm just, it's been off camera, just reassembling the block and all the little things that have to go on, cleaning bolts, all of that non-glamorous, but stuff that I kind of really enjoy, making it all nice and neat and clean and new. In this episode, we are going to set the valve lash, and then we are going to do the long-awaited cylinder leak down test to see if the work that we did fixed the problem with cylinder number 4. If you haven't, I would love it if you'd hit subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. That would help the channel. Thanks for being part of Third Stall Garage. Let's see how this episode goes. Have a great day. So here is the heart of Party. She is mostly back together and looking good. I love how this is coming out. Boxer engines are just cool. Heads were redone, bolted on. I used the new MLS improved gaskets. These don't have the gaskets in yet, but in the previous episode, you saw the camshafts and the cam covers go in. I ended up, this is the parts car. I had 2 timing belts. Both of them only had a few miles on them. The one that came out of the parts car, you can kind of see the condition by how much of the print is left. This was a Gates brand. This was Napa. This one was only used for a couple thousand miles. According to the sticker on that one, it was used for about 10,000 miles. So basically, I decided to reuse this timing belt because I know the guy that put it on, and a full kit was used. I had one bearing, sorry, you're off camera. I had one bearing that just felt a little funny, so I used this pulley off of the other set. But went through and cleaned up and resealed the oil pump, water pump, cleaned up the cover. I have one bolt hole that's messed up, and I think that's just gonna be it. Gonna be the way that it is. I do need to get the thermostat, new thermostat yet. I do have the thermostat gasket, but not that I know if there's anything wrong with it, but if I'm this far, I'm going to put a new thermostat in. I bought a gasket kit from Subaru. There's the sticker. Comes with a bajillion little gaskets and O-rings and seals, and I did not know what all they were, so I lined up all the ones I didn't know what they were, took a picture, posted on Facebook, and I'll put that picture here. I'll insert it hopefully right now in the video so you can pause on it and look at it. And then this is what the different ones were. The gasket for the EGR valve, thermostat. I never figured out what this one was, or at least at the time of recording, I don't know what this one is. Probably by the time I post this, I will have figured it out. Rear bell housing, wrist pin plate cover, coolant passages in the block halves, which I didn't use because I didn't split the block. The oil plug in the bottom of the oil pan. Banjo bolt rings, 2 of them. I know what banjo bolts are. I don't know where they are in the engine. I gotta figure that one out yet. I was the oil pickup tube. Case bolts through the water jacket, which I didn't do. Dipstick O-rings, injector top and bottom. Oil return gasket for the oil pan, block half seals, which I didn't use, oil filler neck ring O-ring, and then the water crossover. And then these are the spark plug, top of the spark plug tubes. Next, I'm going to rotate this puppy up, take this valve cover off, and we're going to work on setting the valve lash. Okay, time to set the valve lash. If you aren't familiar with what valve lash is, these are your rocker arms, and as the camshaft spins around, the lobes or the bumps on the camshaft push on this end of the rocker arm, which is basically a teeter-totter, and then this end of the rocker arm pushes down on the valve, which opens up the valve, which you can kind of see in there with horrible lighting. And as that little stick down there with the valve head on it goes in, it allows the intake gases to flow down through, and then the valve in the bottom allows the exhaust to flow out. This rocker arm just rocks back and forth, super fast. And as temperatures change and as things wear, you don't want it to bind and be tight. You want a little tiny bit of a gap in there, and that gap is critical. If that gap is set too small as the engine warms up, this rocker arm will go tight, which will allow that valve to never fully close, which will make the engine not perform well, and probably, I think the valve overheats because it's not touching the aluminum cylinder head, which allows it to dissipate heat and can cause lots of problems. So, setting the valve lash is normal maintenance. I know in old Beetles like this, you should do it like every time you change the oil. Modern cars don't need that as often. But I've had the heads redone, the valves reset, so it's time to adjust that. Your cam pulleys have an arrow cast into them. So basically, we're going to set the valve lash on cylinder 1, then cylinder 3, then cylinder 2, and cylinder 4. So to do cylinder 1, you want to turn the crank until that arrow is pointing straight up at the timing mark. That will then tell you that cylinder 1 is at top dead center, meaning that all 4 of the valves should be closed, which means you should have a little bit of looseness. Hopefully you heard that before my furnace kicked on. I already went and checked the valve lash on number 1 just because I wanted to make sure it went well before I started filming it. So once cylinder 1 is done, you're going to put a 22 mil socket in the end of your crank bolt, and you're going to turn it 180 degrees. And that will then put cylinder 3 at top dead center. So now we can go and check the valve lash with cylinder 3. Let's rotate that up so it's a little easier for us to get at. All right, let me set the camera on the tripod. You want your intake valve lash to be basically 8 thousandths plus or minus 1.5 thousandths. So you want an 8 thousandths feeler gauge to go through just with a little bit of drag. You want to basically 6.5 or a 6 thousandths would be way too loose, and a 10 thousandths would not fit. So I'm going to shoot for an 8 thousandths feeler gauge to fit with a slight amount of drag, but a 10 thousandths feeler gauge won't go through on the intake. On the exhaust, I'm going to do the same thing with a 10 thousandths. I'll set it for a 10 thousandths feeler gauge, but a 12 thousandths won't go through. All right, so we're going to start with 2 intake valves on the top. Here is my 8 thousandths feeler gauge, and just before I loosen, I'm going to check. My 8 kind of starts to go through on that intake valve, but will not. That one will not go through either. So both of them are a little tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 10 mil wrench, put it on the jam nut, put a flathead screwdriver in the nut on top, loosen the jam nut, Wow, that's pretty tight. Okay, so jam nut's loose. Take my feeler gauge. Try to do this in such a way that you can see, and hopefully hear with the furnace running. So with my 8/1000 feeler gauge in there, well, it's not in there yet because it won't fit. You basically want the feeler gauge to slide back and forth. There we go. I turned it back probably 30 degrees. The screw I turned back about 30 degrees. And now my feeler gauge will slide under there. You want it to slide not super free, loose like that, but so that there's a slight even drag across it. Now what you got to be a little careful for is sometimes it'll feel really tight, but if you don't have the feeler gauge kind of nice and level, or like I'm kind of pushing down with my thumb, the feeler gauge will feel tighter than it really is. So just keep trying to move him back and forth the way that it is. Then keep your screwdriver on there to keep it in the same spot. Tighten the jam nut back down. Okay, once that's set, see, that feels too loose. All right, do it again. Keep doing it until you get it right. Okay, that is snugged up a little more. All right, so now I'm to the point where my 8/1000 feeler gauge feels pretty good. I'm gonna take my 10/1000. Just make sure that won't go through. Nope, cannot force that one through. All right, so valve number 1 is done. Time to do valve number 2. I'll probably put you on fast forward for this one. All right, time for the exhaust valves. Same rocker, 2 valves. We're gonna loosen, we'll start with the outboard one. Doesn't really matter which one. I was gonna say obviously, but maybe it's not obvious. Should never say something's obvious. It's not kind to somebody who doesn't know. Okay, so this one I should be able to get a 10 through, and it is not even close. All right, one's done. Time for number 2. All right, time to rotate the crank 180 degrees, and then we'll do cylinder 2, another 180, and we'll do cylinder 4. Hello friends, we've come to that time in the show where it is time to do the cylinder leak down test and see if I've made the engine better or worse. So if you haven't seen, if you haven't been following along, one of the original episodes with this engine, I did a cylinder leak down test. Bought a pretty inexpensive kit off of Amazon. Basically what it does is it puts pressure into your cylinder, and then you put 100 psi in and it tests how much back pressure it holds, and then based on it should have somewhere 75%, 25% leakage, 25%, 75% retaining, and then that lets you know if the rings, the valves and whatnot are in good condition. My cylinders 1, 3, and 2 were all really good. My cylinder 4 was at like 60%. So I am redoing it today. Simply screw in this hose into the spark plug hole. There's a little O-ring on the end of the spark plug tube here, which allows it to seal. One of the challenges that I have is where my hose connects to this fitting spins, which means I'm not able to get it super tight in the spark plug hole. So I may have a little bit of leaking at that O-ring. I don't know for sure. But I'm going to leave it that way. I thought about JB welding it shut, and I'm just going to be consistent with the way the first test was done. So that is tight as it can get. The air is on. It is at 100 psi. And here we go for cylinder number 1. I am in the green, right at about 30%. So I'm happy with that. One thing I did that I forgot to tell you is you have to put each cylinder as you do it at top dead center, or the piston will go flying down, and that's not good. Simple way to tell if it's at top dead center is to plug it in, and then as you crank it, you'll be able to hear the air escape. You can also go by your little timing arrow mark, or follow the same pattern exactly as when we did the valve lash. So turn the crank 180 degrees. Time for the test on cylinder number 3. Cylinder number 3 wasn't great. That wasn't the results I wanted. I gotta figure something out. To be honest with you, I'm not having a very good moment. So cylinders 1, 2, and 4, now 4 was my problem child before, are all good. They're at about 25%. Cylinder 3 is at about 50% leakage. Usually you can tell if the air is coming out the top or through the intake, then you've got an intake valve leak problem. If you hear the air rushing out of the bottom, that's the exhaust valve problem. If you hear it coming out the crankcase, then it might be a ring issue. It does sound like the air's coming out the bottom here. I don't know what that would typically sound like with the oil pan off. But I'm pretty disappointed. And I was sitting here feeling very confident that everything had been done really well and I wasn't going to have any problems. Now I'm not sure what to do. Frankly, right now, I'm just going to take the valve cover off and stare at it for a little bit. I don't know if I should pull the whole timing belt off again. Son of a gun. Now is probably not the time to do anything rash. I got some figuring to do. I don't know what to tell you. I love working on engines until I don't. All right, so I took the head off. Gasket looks fine. So it's this cylinder. The way it was installed, it seems to be installed correctly. It's not kinked or anything. Bolts seem to be torqued fine. The head's newly machined, so that should seal fine. It seems like from when the air's leaking, the problem's not with the valves. So I'm looking at the cylinder and I wondered if I had kinked a ring, scratched the cylinder wall. All the honing looks good. I don't see any problems there. So I was looking at the piston with the 3 new rings in. Top ring split is there. Bottom ring, the split's there. Got the logo up in both of them. It's just the way they're supposed to be. It's dirty, obviously, from previous miles. I don't know. Everything's looking fine. I don't know what to do. I wish the one of you that's out there who's wiser than me, that knows what's going on and who's watching this, could text me right now. So here's where I am. Cylinder number 3's got me worried, and I don't know what to do. So posted online, asked a bunch of questions, and the comments and feedback that I've gotten is recheck the valve lash. I don't know if you can hear that, but all 3 of those rockers are loose. I've got the cylinder 3 on top dead center. And so I don't think it's that. I'm assuming that the valves are in good condition. They were professionally machined when the head was redone. I pulled the head back off. You saw that. Everything looks fine. The rings are loose in the grooves. I didn't see any problems with the grooves. They're clocked. I don't know if they're clocked correctly, but at least the gaps are clocked. The only thing that I can think of at this point is that the rings have not broken into the cylinder wall yet. And for whatever reason, the other 3 cylinders all seem to have decent leak down except for cylinder 3. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me as to why that would be. One cylinder would be significantly different than the others. But I've had several people comment that, you know, you really can't get an accurate leak down test reading until after the engine's broken in. And I'll have to figure out what a break-in cycle is, but I'm assuming you fire it up and you run it for 20 minutes, varying the RPMs or something like that. So I think at this point, I'm going to continue moving forward with assembly. I can put the oil pan on the bottom, get the timing belt cover on, work on putting the intake on top, clean up the EGR valve, and all that kind of stuff, and get it ready. Once it's all assembled, then Lord willing, I'll pull the car in, pull the other car, pull the 2010 Forester in, pull Ruby in. We'll pull the engine out of Ruby and put this one in. So I think that's going to wrap this one up for today. A mixed bag of feeling really good about an engine that looks good, and I think I've done all the steps right, but I have a nagging, healthy dose of self-doubt after that leak down test. So that's what it is. I don't know how to change it. Keep moving forward. Thanks for being part of this. Have a great day.